It will reboot automatically and it will present you a login screen. You remember in the first session we spoke about one of the main features of Unix or Linux operating systems is security. Not only Unix or Linux, any operating system. So here you provide a security, the first level of security through user ID and password. So now what user ID and password you should give? You remember initially I gave my user ID as Ravi, R-A-V-I, with password as password. So either you can log in with Ravi user ID or root user ID. Both will have the same password. I once again repeat the issue we might face while installing this Red Hat Enterprise Linux is while we actually create the VMware, our motherboard may not support virtualization, right? If you receive a message that Intel VTX not enabled, disabled like that, you have to go to your BIOS settings, enable virtualization and come back to this VMware, and you can either click on File, New Virtual Machine, or directly click on New Virtual Machine from the interface that comes here. Okay, then it wouldn't be any problem. It's a very straightforward step after that. We are done with the 938 packages. Let's see what happens after this. If you observe it carefully, the best thing is this has no effect on our current Windows operating system. I am using Windows 7 64-bit. The things that are happening inside has no effect any point of view on my Windows. I think that's the beautiful thing with this virtualization technology. It has just started post installation steps. It is installing the bootloader. So once those post installation steps complete, it is rebooting the system. Please note that it is not rebooting your Windows box or Windows operating system. All this reboot is happening within this virtual machine. And under the VM, you have created a Linux virtual machine called Linux 1. So all this is happening inside that virtual machine only. Once the reboot completes, you will see a screen like this. All you got to do is click on this. Okay, and I enter my password as password. It will take me to a desktop environment like you see on Windows box. Okay, but please note that sometimes when you keep a cursor inside this VMware, it won't come just like that, right? If you want to take your cursor out of it, it might not come out. In that scenario, what you have to do is you have to press Control and Alt together to release the cursor, like it showed here. Okay, Control and Alt you have to press. Now this might give you the same look and feel like Windows. This is your desktop, but I'm going to do certain steps right now, okay, so that I can access this VM from outside of VM network. So I'm going to right click here, click on open in terminal. This will open my IP. This will open a terminal. Now when I type a command called ifconfig, we will cover this later, but for the setup purpose, when I do this ifconfig, it will give me this IP address. Okay, I can press Ctrl Alt to release the cursor, and if I do tab and go back to this command prompt from my Windows, and when I do ping and give this IP address, I should be able to ping it. I am receiving a reply. So that means this box is accessible from this guy. So the next thing I do is I go to my putty and go to putty here, and I'll enter my host name. All you gotta do is just click on the putty. That's enough. Once you click on putty dot or putty.exe, enter your IP address here, 128, and if you want you can save the session, right? I can save, let's say it as a class. So if I click on save, it is saved as a class. I just click on class and click on open. First time I have to accept yes. Here I can say user ID as Ravi and password as password. You remember this is the user ID I gave at the installation starting. Okay. Now, if just in case you cannot access this box from outside, that means there might be a firewall stopping you from doing that. Okay. Now, in that case, what you have to do is you have to go inside this VM, and when you say service IP table status, you basically have to do this as a root. How do you switch to root from the current user ID Ravi? You have to say su-root. Well, in fact, you are learning the commands before we actually start the class, but these are needed because these are the things that administrator takes care of. Now you switch user to root. Hyphen is an option. It will source root specific environment, and you have to enter the password as a password. Now I logged in as a root. When I say who am I, it shows me that I logged in as a root. Now what I do here is when I say service IP tables status, ideally we don't have to stop like this in a real environment, but here you might have to stop it. Okay, but in a real environment they'll just open a port so that you can access it from Windows box. If you look at your host name, the host name is showing as this guy. So you simply say host name as, the command to change is, for example, Linux1. Just say Linux1 is the host name. When you say host name, you'll get an output like this. It's no longer localhost.localadmin. There is one more place you have to modify, etc sysconfig. Yeah, it's a sysconfig. Under sysconfig, that means you can directly type cd/etc/sysconfig to come here. You don't have to worry about this command. I'll teach these commands later. You have to do this setup only if you are not able to access it from your putty, from Windows box. Okay. If you are able to access it, don't worry about it. Now here there is a file called network. You do vi network and you press down arrow, then right arrow, right arrow, right arrow, right arrow till you go to this L. Then you press shift D. Once you press shift D, that will actually remove that name. So you have to say your host name as Linux1. Basically this is all your Unix administrator or Linux administrator will take care. Then you have to say shift : WQ to save it. All you got to say is service network restart. Just restart your network. This will restart your entire network with the latest changes we have done. So if I do ifconfig, of course you have the IP address. There is one more place where ideally your administrator adds, that is etc host file. Okay, here you add a line by pressing O, IP address. So I haven't copied that IP address. Let me see what is that IP address from here. 192.168.207.128. 207.128. I say it as Linux 1. So that my remote missions can find me with just a host name. I don't have to type IP address each and every time. So if I quickly recap what we have done, we have downloaded these products, then we installed VMware, then in VMware we have created a Red Hat Linux box, and we have did some changes inside the Red Hat Linux VM as a root. So those are only needed if you cannot access your IP address from Windows, or if you cannot ping this IP address from your Windows box. This actually concludes this session. Just in case if you face any trouble while doing these things, feel free to email me at the email address mentioned in my first slide, that is info@etraining.guru. Thank you for your patience. Good luck with the installation and setup.